Tanjo, Volume 1, 7 Shadows. Chapter 6. Home. A sound. The faint sigh of snow compressed beneath a boot. Tanjo whirled. Her kimono snapped in the cold air as she loosed the throwing blade in one swift motion. Steel sang through the trees, striking deep into a pine trunk. Bark splintered. A grunt answered, low, startled. She recoiled, sinking deeper into the underbrush. Eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. A shape shifted, something that didn't belong. Several paces away, two legs stood faintly visible beneath the pine boughs. She raised her brows, her gaze sliding to the right. Another set. 2 figures total. Towering. Silent. Tanjo jumped at the sudden crash of timber below. The collapse sent a surge of sparks into the sky, the flames leaping higher. Light flared through the trees, burning away the shadows. For a heartbeat, everything stood illuminated in stark orange, and what had been half hidden was revealed in full. The 2 soldiers were cast in an orange glow. Their armor, once white as bone, was marred by soot and streaked dark with blood. The man on the left had shifted his shoulder back, narrowly avoiding her throwing blade. Splinters of bark and shaken snow drifted down beside him, catching against the ridges of his armor. He turned his head, following the knife where it trembled deep in the pine trunk. Then his gaze began to climb, retracing the weapon's path through smoke and shadow, up the slope, past the underbrush, until it stopped. His head tilted slightly, like a predator, more animal than human. His eyes locked on the ridge, staring into the tangle of darkness where she waited. Tanjo's breath hitched, chest tightening as though his eyes had speared straight through the brush to pin her where she crouched. Her fingers clenched against the earth, the cold seeping into her palm, but doing nothing to steady the trembling in her limbs. The tremor burned into anger, heat rising to meet the weight of his stare. She was no one's prey. The soldier lowered his head and stepped forward from the covering of branches, certain the firelight had betrayed him. Snow crunched beneath his weight, his size unfolding as he squared himself to her, broad and armored. From the ridge below came the faint crackle of timber collapsing, another structure in the village surrendering to the flames. The firelight splintered through the trees as he advanced, first catching the curve of his helmet, then sliding down to reveal the mask in its full, monstrous design. Forged in the likeness of a dragon, its steel jaw jutted with fangs that glinted faintly in the restless glow. Behind the narrow slits, a dull crimson light burned, unnatural, unblinking, glowing like pure evil. Tanjo's chest tightened. The weight of his stare pressed against her ribs, hot and suffocating, as though the darkness itself had fixed on her. Slowly, she rose from her crouch, spine straightening, shoulders squaring against his. Her eyes assessed him, the bulk of his armor, traces of weakness in his stance. Her fingers flexed against the hilt at her side, katana humming beneath her touch as her thumb slid to rest on the sheath's edge. She met the stare of the dragon, her own eyes burning in response. Every part of her screamed to strike, to cut him down where he stood, to make him bleed for what they had done, for the village, for her village. Behind her, the fire's heat flared, searing her back as though the flames themselves demanded vengeance. The mask hissed as he breathed, each exhale a low growl that steamed from its fanged maw. Tanjo dropped her chin, eyes narrowing, a hot ember sparking to life beneath her ribs. Her weight lowered in a deep stance, muscles primed. Her katana rose inch by inch until its steel caught the firelight, every nerve in her body alive, the blaze in her blood demanding release. He came in full force, curved blade slashing for Tanjo's throat. She dropped low and slid toward him on the snow. His strike went high, wide, cutting nothing but air above her head. She saw the opening. His arm was overextended. Still on one knee, Tanjo drove her blade up in a tight sweep. Steel tore through flesh just above the elbow. Hot blood spiraled across the snow. Droplets flecked her cheek. The severed arm and katana spun away together as a scream ripped from him, raw, jagged, human. He clutched at the ruin of himself, reeling, staggering, trying to hold what was already gone. Tanjo's stomach lurched. Instinct shoved her forward anyway. She rose behind him and pivoted, heel snapping out with a dancer's grace and a samurai's force. Her kick slammed into his knee. The joint cracked, sharp, sickening, and his massive frame buckled sideways. Snow exploded as he crashed down. But Tanjo was already moving. Her blade arced overhead as she lunged into the strike. Steel carved through white armor, then deeper, through flesh, through bone, until the katana sank across his back and drove him into the earth. Pinned. For a heartbeat, she didn't recognize the strength in her own limbs. Shock flashed through her, bright and clean. She didn't know where this brutality had come from, or if it had lived inside her all along. She wrenched her blade free. Her chest hitched. She staggered back, boots slipping in the churned snow. Her heel struck something solid. She looked down. An arm, still sleeved in white armor, lay sprawled beside her foot. Revulsion snapped through her like a whip. With a fierce kick, she sent it spinning into the dark, snow scattering in its wake. Her face twisted with pure disgust as her eyes followed the vaulted limb into the shadows. The severed arm swung wide and nearly clipped the second soldier. He staggered back, momentarily stunned, his dragon mask snapping toward her. For an instant, their gazes locked. Crimson eyes met Tanjo's wide, burning stare. With a growl, his free hand rose to his shoulder. Fingers closed around the kunai jutting from the joint. In one brutal motion, he tore it free. Blood spilled hot over his armor and tainted the pure snow at his feet. He flung the blade aside as though it were nothing. From behind the dragon mask came a sharp exhale. Steam curled through the nostrils. Rage narrowed, focused, absolute. Bile crawled up Tanjo's throat. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, forcing her breath to steady. For a moment, nothing moved. Only flakes of ash and snow drifting between them. It wasn't fear twisting her stomach. It was the weight of her first true fight. The first time she had seen blood spill hot from her own strike. The first time she had felt steel part flesh and bone. The sensation clung to her hands, alive and electric. Her body thrummed with violent retribution, with the release of years of training that had been sharpening her for this moment. She held the dragon's unflinching stare. Her eyes burned and watered from the smoke, but she forced them to focus. Firelight slid across her face in restless bands until she looked cast in molten bronze, warrior forged in a crucible, the test standing inches away. Her crimson kimono had loosened, silk trousers billowing beneath. With a practiced flick, she swept the fabric back behind her thigh and dropped into a wide, low stance. Her katana angled toward the snow, one clean line of cold steel, poised. The soldier adjusted, almost imperceptibly, the faint grind of boot on frost, his blade lifting a breath higher, fingers tightening and easing, a shoulder hitching into place. Small movements, measured, calculated. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. Branches groaned under ice. Embers from the burning village drifted upward and snagged in the needles overhead. Heat and cold, ash and snow, braided together in the air between them. For a heartbeat, the dragon only stared, head tilting slowly, as if questioning what stood before him. A girl? A warrior? A samurai? Tanjo's lips twitched. Not joy, not relief. Something sharper, the faintest thrill sparking at the edge of her terror. A glee at the challenge, a test of everything hammered into her bones. Slow and deliberate, he raised his sword into guard. The silence between them stretched taut, honed to an edge as keen as the steel they carried. Then he broke into a dash. Armor thundered as he surged forward, dragging the world back into motion. His blade cut down, then snapped into a thrust for her ribs, his full weight driving behind it. Her pulse roared, drowning everything. But her body moved first. She stepped wide to the right, slipping past the flash of steel. She dropped low, knees skimming the snow as she slid, frost spraying from her boots. In the same breath she twisted, one fluid motion, and her katana rose. A single, merciless arc. The strike tore through his chest plate with a scream of rending metal. He faltered mid-lunge. Blood flooded the seams of his armor. His weapon slipped from numb fingers. He dropped to his knees, hands pressing uselessly at the widening ruin, then pitched forward, face first, into the snow at her feet. Tanjo staggered back until her spine struck rough bark. Her chest heaved. Hot blood slicked down her blade and dripped into the snow in dark, blooming circles. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the shudder of release, from knowing the strike had been hers alone. He fell. Because of me. The realization struck like a bell inside her head, drowned in the roar of blood. Yet beneath it ran something colder, steadier. She had not only survived, she had overpowered, destroyed, ended. Years of training had sharpened her hands, but what moved her now felt older than memory. Something coiled in her blood, unyielding, as if it had been waiting for this night. A sound tore through the trees, breaking pine. Tanjo spun, breath catching. The third soldier, the one she had kicked over the ridge, was clawing his way back up from the valley. Armor dragged like an anchor as he fought through the snow. He hauled himself over the lip of the slope, katana still in hand, and straightened, rising to his full height. Firelight from the burning village below rimmed him in stark red, his silhouette towering against the ridgeline. The sheer size of him should have made her recoil. But years under Yasuke had twisted fear into something else. Adrenaline. Her pulse quickened, not from dread, but from the promise of a challenge worthy of her steel. She shifted her stance, tightened her grip, and waited. Patient. Honor demanded she let him take his breath, let him stand, let him face her as a warrior before she cut him down. The forest itself seemed to brace, shadows leaning toward her in quiet defense. The dragon-masked soldier turned, head tilting slow, the steel jaw sweeping across the dark. His gaze raked the underbrush until it caught. A lone spark in the night. Her crimson kimono. His eyes locked. With a grunt that shook the stillness, he began to move. His footsteps fell heavy into the snowbank as he lumbered toward her, each stride sinking deep, dragging him forward through the drift. Tanjo stared, unblinking, watching the rise and fall of his chest as he heaved his way through the white. Flames crackled in the distance. Ash hissed into snow. Wind tugged loose strands against her temple, cold biting her skin clean. One slow inhale. One exhale of steam. Focus snapped into place. Then he stopped, staring past her at the carnage. 2 white dragons sprawled in the drift, their blood painted across the snow in dark, steaming trails. One lay twisted and dismembered, an arm cleaved at the elbow. The other was half buried, face first in a crimson-soaked mound. The stench of iron hung heavy, mixing with smoke and blood, thick enough to taste. A single ember drifted down between them, fading before it touched the ground with a solemn hiss. His shoulders stiffened, armor creaking as tension ran through him. The dragon mask tilted, just enough to betray what lay beneath. Even through steel, he could not hide his shock. For a heartbeat, silence pressed in. Then his gaze snapped back to her. Something seethed inside him, anger gathering, building, burning through every muscle. His hands closed over the katana's hilt, one over the other, grinding metal against metal as if he meant to choke the life from the weapon itself. The rasp tore through the stillness, a promise of violence barely contained. Tanjo's gaze cut back, sharp as her blade. A flicker of satisfaction glimmered in her eyes. One corner of her mouth twitched upward into the ghost of a grin, a knowing look that struck deeper than steel. She had taken from him what he and his kind had stolen from her. Beneath her breath, too low for any ears but her own, a vow slipped free into the cold. For the village. The words lay heavy on her tongue, tasting of copper. A guttural roar ripped from the last dragon's throat, raw and ragged, echoing through the trees like a beast driven mad. He thundered into a sprint, katana raised high, the sheer weight of him shaking snow loose from the branches overhead. There was no strategy now, only brute rage. A storm of muscle and steel hurtling toward her. His blade crashed down, slower but monstrous in force. The katana sheared clean through a low pine limb, the broken length crashing to the ground in a burst of needles. Tanjo sidestepped, the strike missing her skull by inches. Snow sprayed as she rolled beneath the falling branch, the cold searing through her sweat-slicked back. She came up already moving, blade low, breath tight. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She was on him before his katana could finish its follow-through. Tanjo slid in under his ribs, steel flashing up along the seam of his armor. The edge found the gap beneath his shoulder plate and drove through, hard, skating along bone, biting deep behind the shoulder blade. The dragon jerked, a strangled sound ripping through the mask. Tanjo didn't stop. She pivoted off his bulk, kimono snapping as she spun behind him, and her blade came around in a tight, brutal arc, low, precise, carving through the back of his leg at the knee. Tendon gave. His weight collapsed. He pitched forward with a roar, one gauntleted hand clawing for the snow. And Tanjo rose with him on his blind side, already mid-swing, steel cut clean through the shoulder. The arm came off in one merciless sweep, armor and flesh parting as the severed limb tumbled into the drift. His body slammed down beside it, snow erupting in a pale burst. For a heartbeat, only his breath remained, ragged, steaming through the dragon's fangs, while Tanjo stood over him, blade angled low, chest heaving, eyes lit like coals. Embers drifted around her in slow spirals, clinging and breaking away like dying stars. For a heartbeat, she seemed otherworldly, born of fire and shadow both. Her gaze fell on the bloodied face beneath the mask, and a sneer tugged at her lips. Stone-faced. He writhed, straining to rise, yet every limb betrayed him. His body hitched and sagged, breath rasping behind clenched teeth. The snow steamed where his blood ran thick, black crimson spreading beneath him. With a flick of her wrist, she snapped her blade clean. Red flecked the snow in sharp percussion. The motion was pure instinct, one her father had performed thousands of times after demonstrations, a habit carved into muscle and bone. A ragged rattle pulled her back. The soldier's chest heaved. Air dragged into his ruined body. His hand twitched, searching, toward the katana lying inches away in the drift. Tanjo's mouth tightened, her brow pinching, half respect, half grim amusement at his refusal to yield. She let him have it. Just a heartbeat of hope as his fingers brushed the hilt, a cruel mirror of what she had seen below, the helpless villager bowing into death, perhaps at the hands of this very man. Her chest tightened, her eyes darkened. She moved. Steel flashed down. The blade split his gauntlet and took the wrist in a single, merciless stroke. His scream tore the night, unraveling into curses through blood and pain. Tanjo didn't flinch. Wind worried the edges of her crimson kimono, snapping silk and smoke together as embers spiraled past her shoulders. She stood over him like a verdict, firelit, steady, awake. She lowered the tip and pressed it into his side, grinding into the vulnerable seam, slow and merciless. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice low, raw with fury beneath the thunder in her ears. He recoiled, face contorting beneath the mask. Then he spat, blood and broken teeth scattering at her feet, staining the snow dark. A wet laugh bubbled through the red on his lips. "Why should I tell you?" he rasped. "You're nothing. A half-breed disgrace. A pitiful woman, hiding behind a samurai's name." Tanjo's lip curled, the sneer twisting her face into something fierce and unrecognizable. "Who are you?" she snarled again, voice raw, each word forced through her teeth, steeped in disgust and fury. She twisted the steel deeper, drawing a ragged gasp from his throat. For a heartbeat, he only trembled beneath the mask, breath sawing through the fanged steel. Then his head tilted, as if tasting her anger. When he spoke again, it came out thick, blood-choked and sure. "We are the dragons," he rasped. "You cannot escape us. No matter where you run, we will find you. We were sent for the coal-skinned samurai, and we will find him." Before he could finish, her blade silenced him, steel plunging through armor, flesh, and frozen earth alike. Sharp, swift, final. For a moment she stared, unblinking, at the stillness that followed. The forest went too quiet. Even the distant crackle from the village seemed far away now, muffled, like the world had stepped back and left her alone with what she'd done. Her fingers finally loosened. Slowly, she pulled the blade free. She wiped the steel clean and slid the blade into her sheath. The fuki no to she'd gathered lay on the ground in scattered patches of snow. She quickly gathered them, holding them in her hands, raising them to her chest, fingers touching the folded stems through her crimson kimono. Tanjo sucked in a breath, sharp, urgent, and the world snapped back into place. A gust of wind rushed the ridge, pushing hard against Tanjo's body, swirling her crimson kimono in a blaze of motion. She braced her stance, eyes opening. Her gaze lifted. Smoke from the ruined village below curled into the night, carried northward on the wind. She watched it drift, its ghostly ribbons veiling the stars. For a breath, she thought it only the last sigh of a dying place. Then she saw it. On the horizon, beyond the line of outstretched cedars, new flames clawed skyward. Bright, hungry. A fire not born of accident, but of devastation, growing as it devoured its host. The rushing in her ears drowned the forest, leaving only the thunder of her own pulse. The smoke's trail pointed like a blade, straight into the marrow of her being. Home. Tanjo, Volume 1, 7 Shadows.